Here's why I know that LEC will win Worlds this year. An LEC team will win Worlds this year. It's because they have a secret buff. If you track Froskurinn's career, went to the LPL, and suddenly the LPL becomes a force. Now, Froskurinn is a commentator in the LEC, and G2 is one match away from World's champion. So, Frosk, you, as the buff of a region, we can only assume, congratulations, LEC World Champs in 2020, right?
Yeah, it was supposed to be LEC World Champions in 2019, but you also got the most important buff. It's the wife buff. So I've doubled up. I've figured it out.
Listen, so when you look at G2, and I asked this question to our panel, I want to ask you this question as well. Obviously, G2 didn't do all that much in the offseason, but they remain the team to beat. Has the field improved enough that we have some legitimate contenders?
I mean, that's kind of the question that everyone asks every single year, and the answer is always the same. It's always just G2 and Fnatic. I think I just caught the tail end of what Tyler was talking about, and I have to kind of just be in agreement. I expect this to be a two-horse race like it is every single time in the LEC. I will say that in my conversations with other analysts like Veteran, Schalke do have a reputation of being spring kings. Obviously, Forgiven coming back into the league is a lot of hype. Fans are very excited. So I think that there might be some like upshoot points where maybe some of the top two teams fall down, but I expect LEC Spring Finals to be G2 Fnatic, LEC Summer Finals to be G2 Fnatic.
All right, so actually, Frosk is going to join us for this entire LEC segment, so I'm going to bring back our panelists. Yeah, Frosk is going to be an analyst with us here on ESPN Esports. Let's talk about Forgiven. She mentioned Forgiven. We have to talk about God-given Forgiven, right? Back from the Greek military. Let's start in Los Angeles on this one. Tyler, you raved about Forgiven and how great it is that he's back in the league from a personality standpoint, but he's been gone for a while, so we got to wonder, what's he going to be like when he returns?
What I love about God-given and him returning to save us, mere peasants, waiting for the true king to return, is that it's like we're bringing like a caveman to the future ages, right? Because he left not because he was a bad player or he needed to leave. It's because he had to go to the Greek military. So he disappeared, went to the Greek military, and now he's back in this zany world where we have Syndra in the bot lane, Yasuo in the bot lane. How is this, this guy who's the most AD carry of AD carries, right there of Uzi, how is he gonna, contend with all these wackiness and all these crazy picks in the bot lane? Is he gonna adapt and play Yasuo or Syndra in the bot lane? Or is he gonna be very staunch in his approach of being like, I'm gonna pick Tristana, I'm gonna pick my old favorites, and I'm gonna stomp you that way? Which the most exciting thing for me about Schalke and Forgiven is that we're bringing this guy from the past into the future, and how is he gonna contend? Because we all know mechanically Forgiven is one of the best players in the entire world. He's a savant at video games. He played Heroes of the Storm for 2 weeks, he was the top of that. He played Overwatch, top of that. Any game you give him, he's gonna be one of the best players at. So I don't think he's gonna fall behind in terms of mechanics, but I really wonder how he's gonna really function in this new crazy world of the bottom lane.
Frosk, I got a question for you about Forgiven. I mean, this is a guy who has a very high skill ceiling. He helped H2K get to the semis of Worlds in 2016. He helped SK get a 2015 EU LCS Summer Championship. Can he help Schalke elevate to that level, or is there just not a lot for him to work with there?
I mean, to quote another player when talking about scrims, Forgiven's champion pool looks a bit 2016 right now, and I think Tyler does bring up a really good point that the meta has shifted so dramatically in what's being played in the bot lane, and naturally Forgiven is a talented player that eventually he will learn those new tricks, but there is going to be a barrier to entry, at least initially, of getting kind of your feet wet and figuring out where you're going to strike first. And then you have to look at the rest of the team around him. Having Gilius in the jungle, you're still there with Abba, who isn't the strongest of the mid lane champion pool, and then you have a guy like Dreams, who really didn't get to showcase a lot on SK Gaming. So it's not like Forgiven is just slotting into a star-studded roster where you're like, yes, this is exactly what I want to see for a team surrounding God-Given. I want him to just be able to hard carry and everyone else to be superstars, because I don't think that that team is built that way. So while it's very exciting to see kind of all the changes that the LEC bot lanes are going through, because you have so many new supports coming in, a lot of new, 4 new supports, 4 new ADCs coming in, like every single bot lane has almost changed in the LEC. with the Forgiven cherry on top.
Frost, do you think this team will get along off the Rift?
I mean, that's the $1 million question. The joke is always, so there's kind of two different types of teams in scrims. There's the very young teams in scrims where they're like either the rookie year or they're just young themselves, and then they go and they beat someone like G2 in scrims and they feel great, and that means a lot for them. Like if a team like Misfits is just smashing G2 in scrims, you'd be like, okay, yeah, Misfits will probably have a good week. But if teams like G2 or Fnatic lose scrims, it really doesn't mean anything because those players have enough experience that, like, on stage, it's a completely different animal. But with a team like Schalke, when they win scrims, because of how experienced they are, it's kind of like the expectation. And if they lose scrims and then lose on stage, that's when everyone assumes everything's actually just going to combust and blow up. So I hope it's not like that. I would love to have, again, another competitive team in the LEC, but from what I've heard from behind stage of the past, that's kind of the big question mark is the support system in place that when things start to go chaotic, when things stall out, when they hit a plateau, do they have that support system to get them over that hurdle, or they just keep each other alive?
Well, to that point, after talking to some people around the league about scrims, Schalke and SK Gaming aren't doing so hot nowadays, and I don't think Schalke is the worst team in the league. I think that title does get owned by SK Gaming. Sorry, Broken Shard. You're a good dude. You're a good dude, but your team's kind of crap, man.
Wait. More marshmallows. More marshmallows.
You pulled no punches. You're a great person, but your team is garbage. I love it.
I mean, to be fair, like SK Gaming, it was already going to be a really hard road. Their best player was undoubtedly Selfmade, so losing your best player was already going to put you on the back foot before then you're also competing with kind of all the other new pieces coming in. So I don't think it's really just like a slam. I don't think like SK Gaming are looking around like, how did we get here? It wasn't supposed to be like this. I think we very much expect that this was how it was going to go.
So, but I do want to pivot to this while we have you here, because you mentioned this a little bit earlier about young talent and people investing. You know, I mentioned earlier in the show when we were talking about the LCS, but I did a bunch of crunched some numbers and looked at sort of broader trends in the LCS and the LEC for a piece on ESPN.com, and found that 46% of the people currently playing that will play in the LEC in 2020, 46% of the league, nearly half the league, did not play in the EU LCS at all. Pre-franchising, before the league changed its name. There's clearly a major investment in young talent in the LEC, and it worked towards the end of the season for people like Rogue. But when you look at teams, Froskurinn, like Misfits and Vitality and Mad Lions, where 3/5 of their roster are all rookies this year on each of them, how do you evaluate players like that, you know, other than watching ERL, but how do you evaluate players like that, and how do you think those types of teams will perform?
There's a couple of different parts to this question. I kind of want to talk about the first one because I think we're moving goalposts a little bit. It's kind of like, what is your measure of success when you're talking about rookies? Because if your measure of success is winning the LEC, then, I mean, you know, that the rookies didn't work out because our dominant players continue to win, our veteran players continue to win. You might be able to make a case that, hey, Nemesis was the mid laner for Fnatic and Fnatic went to the finals, but that's still one guy in a very crowded field of rookies. If your measure of success is just that, hey, we have, you know, guys like Humanoid and guys like Nemesis, a couple of these handful of rookies, and the teams continue to perform on an international stage kind of across the board, I'd still say it was really built up by a lot of our veteran players. But yes, Europe does have a very deep pool because of the ERL system, which is kind of the next part. How do you judge these players? You have to watch the ERLs, and you have to watch things like EU Masters. I think coming into LEC, we had our eye on Selfmade, and it was just very easy to watch him even in the, I won't say amateur leagues, but kind of like in the semi-professional or step underneath the LEC, that he was going to be the next upcoming talent. And it's this inbuilt system in things like the LPL and the LEC, and even Vietnam, why we continue to see kind of these regions have these diamonds in the rough that rise to the top. It's that inbuilt, the city system really works for them because the grassroots League of Legends community is so strong there.
I want to send this question to Los Angeles. Rookies that you are keeping an eye on in the LEC. Emily, let's start with you.
Well, just to piggyback on Fox's point really quick, I actually think what you're seeing in LEC is great because you have rookies come in at an entry level, and if they perform well, they then do get picked up by larger orgs, right? Like we're seeing that with Selfmade going into Fnatic for this split. You know, Fnatic is one of the headlining teams of the LEC, and we're expecting them to make split finals. In terms of rookies coming in, I always like to watch rookie junglers. So I'm going to be watching Razork, even though I know like next to nothing about him. I'm just really curious because I always like to see junglers moving up, and I want to see how he performs against LEC talent.
May I offer you a different horse, Emily? I would offer you Shadow from Mad Lions. I think that is the guy that you want to watch.
No, it's Frost's now.
I'll add him to my list. Thank you.
Tyler, any names to add?
Rookies, as an NA reporter, I don't really know what that word means. What's a rookie?
Well
Is that
played.
import?
Well
Is that
played.
country?
Wait,
Well played.
But when we did have to submit lists for this to break
had to
down some of
submit
the
names.
some of the content for this show, we did actually pick Tyler, the same person, and
Carzzy.
he is in the same role as the only North American rookie, and that would be Carzzy. Obviously played in the German league, ERL, and around the league, he is highly regarded as someone coming into this
Ridiculously
split.
good.
You know, I think that Mad Lions, of Misfits, Vitality, and Mad Lions, I would probably give the most credit to Mad Lions in terms of how they're going to be able to compete against the rest of the league. I don't anticipate them to necessarily find the exact level of success that Rogue did last year, but I think if you're looking at all of them, I think that they really do have an opportunity to build something that could be very special. Under new management this year, sort of changing things up. I know your player, Shadow, Darren, is also Mad Lions, but I think that Carzzy, having played on Big and really had quite the stellar EUM and ERL experience, I think that he's someone coming into the 2020 LEC that I'm looking forward to a lot.
So those are some players that are entering the LEC. Frost, let's talk about a couple players that are leaving or have left the LEC. Jizuke, Broxa, two names that come to mind. But when you look at it, which players do you think LEC fans will miss the most?
I mean, clearly Broxa. He's like a sweetheart of the league. Fnatic are the biggest team. Broxa kind of became the face of that team by the end of it just because he'll do a lot of interviews. He got a lot of FaceTime. So I think that one's an easy sell that it's Broxa.
Do you think he will do well on Team Liquid?
I mean, I think Awfully already talked about it previously. I think, so there's kind of like two parts to this. A lot of people really get hung up on, was it Broxa that left Fnatic or was it Fnatic that left Broxa? But it ultimately doesn't matter because, you know, Broxa isn't on Fnatic. The only other team that is going to win the LEC is G2. Obviously, G2 aren't going to pick him up as jungler. So the question really is it better to be on Team Liquid than a mid-tier LEC team? And I think it makes perfect sense then. Like, a lot of people will say that Brox is selling out, going to NA. But if you want to win, if you want to go to Worlds, I would much rather be on TL, probably get a massive payday, be surrounded by the region superstars, probably going to get to go to Worlds, than try to play on something like Schalke or Mad Lions and, you know, compete for third place.
You know, I was a little hard earlier on SK Gaming, and I will continue to be so. Obviously, Selfmade was the piece of gold in the pile of poop when it comes to SK Gaming last year.
The fire just keeps growing. Like the fire,
I'll disagree.
man.
Wait. Now, I'll disagree. I understand what you're saying because Selfmade was so integral to like that victory, but it really was the system between Selfmade and Dreams. And then Crownshot also really stepped up on the end of it. Now, I'm not saying if you pull Selfmade out and you just plug anyone in there that SK Gaming aren't going to be probably last place or second to last place. That will absolutely, I assume, happen. But I do think that there was more to SK Gaming than just Selfmade. I think then you're selling guys like Crownshot very short.
Okay, well, to be fair, I do want to ask. I was going with this direction before we got on the SK tangent to Fnatic, right? We see Selfmade reuniting with Nemesis, who he played with in the Spanish ERL. We see him as someone that was highly regarded. He is a strong personality, a Dardoch-like type in some instances in the terms of he expects a lot of his teammates, and he's a very vocal player, sometimes to the detriment of his team. But this is someone he's played with before in Nemesis, and this is a team with people like Reckless and Bwipo who also talk a lot. So I want to get your opinion. How do you think Selfmade will do on Fnatic in 2020?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think it's really easy to plug into any of Fnatic systems. Fnatic have a proven track record that they can take new players and they can put them into their team and just build success. They just like print out championships. And I know that they haven't lifted one with G2 now kind of coming back and just smashing people in the face, but they're always just right there. So I have no doubt that even though I don't think that Selfmade's current play style really works entirely with Fnatic, that Fnatic won't be able to figure this out, especially with Miffy now at the helm. Like, people will say, Fnatic have a completely different system because they've replaced Youngbug. But the fact that it's Miffy there, this guy potentially could be the best League of Legends coach in the world.
That's actually what I was going to ask, is what you thought of Youngbug leaving and Miffy stepping into a coaching role. Because I actually think Miffy could be a really great coach. And talking to his teammates, he's already really vocal and helps lead scrim discussion and stuff like that. But I do think Youngbuk brought a certain style to this team, so I'm wondering how much you think that will change.
I mean, it's kind of like, it's hard because we never really get to pull the curtain back, and there's so many different measurements of kind of what makes a good coach. So if we establish that, like, Koma is probably the greatest coach that League of Legends has ever seen from an achievement background, and then you think, okay, what does Koma have? Okay, he was a former pro player, played into StarCraft. He has immediate buy-in and respect of his players. He understands the professional mentality as well as probably the analytical mentality, because you assume was involved in everything. And it's the fact that Miffy fits that. And I know Youngbuk fit it to an extent, obviously being a former pro player, but he was so much farther back, whereas Miffy is much closer to kind of the current generation of pro player. You know that immediately he's going to get respect and buy-in from his team. Miffy is incredibly eloquent every single time we've had him on broadcast about how he's talking about the game, and he's incredibly intelligent about the game. And then he also has cross-regional expertise, being over in LCS and now back in the LEC. So I think
LCS legend Miffy
has everything, all the ingredients that Koma, or people thought about the tangibles that Koma brought, to now leave his fingerprint on something like Fnatic and the LEC. I'm super excited to see him kind of take this next step of his career, even though he did mention kind of on social media that he wished he was still playing.
Do you think Koma finds the success he's looking for in the LPL, Frosk?
Oof.
On Vici Gaming? How many world champions has Vici Gaming taken and completely destroyed?
Too many.
Oh, easy Hoon.
Too many.
Easy Hoon.
Bangy.
Keep going. Dandy. Bangy.
Yeah.
Vici
Mata. We got the Mata J support.
I think we got our answer.
Never forget.
I think we got our answer. Let's go to this. Everyone has put together their top 3 teams to look out for in the LEC in 2020. I'm assuming everyone knows who number 1 is, but we'll start in Bristol here. Jacob, when you look at your top 3 teams in the LEC in 2020, who you got?
I mean, we've talked about Fnatic at length here as well, but really the one we haven't talked about with Froskurinn here on the show is Origin. And I think that Origin is the one team that made really hefty investments. You know, we saw the side of like Mad Lions, Vitality, and Misfits of like, we'll wait them out. We'll wait and see how G2 falls apart one day eventually. Hopefully, fingers crossed. But Origin did the opposite. Let's go invest, right? And they invested. They recruited Xerxes from Splice, now Mad Lions, who was one of the best junglers in the league last year. They recruited Upset from Schalke 04, who obviously Upset's very highly touted as well, young player, but has also had a lot of good showing. And the really interesting one is Destiny, the support from Oceania, bringing him in. You know, they were evaluating sort of what were our options here, and there weren't a ton in the support role this offseason with Miffy retiring and with Vander being signed up to another contract with Rogue very quickly. Destiny actually was attending Worlds and got recruited by this team because people actually really enjoyed talking to him and playing with him during his time in Europe for Worlds. Origin, I think, is a team that can compete with the best of them. I'm very curious how they will stack up against someone like G2 and Fnatic, and I give them a little bit more credit maybe than the rest of our panel does here.
Darren, you're number 2 and 3?
Fnatic 2, Origin 3. I really do like the Xerxes pickup. I really think that, you know, if you have a solid, really strong jungler on your team, especially with all the new jungle changes that have happened, that's going to help you so much in the long run. So I'm going to put Origin at 3.
Tyler?
I believe I had Fnatic at 2 and Origin at 3, but that's for spring. I think by the end of the year that Rogue is going to find their way to Worlds. I think they're going to pip in, get top 3. I believe in Rogue. That's my team I'm backing in the LEC. I think they have a puncher's chance if everything aligns that they could maybe do the David to G2's Goliath. So I really want to look at Rogue, and I want to see how well they do going into 2020.
Is this the year that Hans Sama turns into a superstar and puts everyone on notice?
I don't think he needs to be a superstar, but I think he needs to be a very reliable, consistent player. We've seen glimpses of superstar Honsoma, especially at Worlds when he was on Misfits. But I think the real superstar on this team is Larson, and I've heard a lot of good things about Finn in the top lane. They're crushing in scrims right now, as Jacob would know. 100 Thieves went over, and they've not been doing very well versus Rogue and Origin. But hey, 100 Thieves beat some of the lower-ranked teams, so as an NA person, you have to take the wins when you get them.
Frosk, are you buying or selling Rogue?
You guys are so obvious, and that you get scrim information. You're like, it's Origin. Move all the stock to Origin. Yeah, Rogue's doing well. It's just.
I always believed in Rogue. I always believed in Rogue.
No stock in scrims. Like, I don't put any stock in scrims.
I believe in Larson and my boy Finn.
I mean, let's look. Okay, let's start with Origin first and foremost. Yes, this roster on paper looks amazing. People were super excited about Xerxes. Alfaro is probably the only highlight of Origin on the back half of that. Nuke Duck did fine. It was a complete collapse from Cold and Mithy. Upset, you'd say that that's an upgrade over Patrick, but then you get a guy like Destiny. And you can say, like, spin it every which way you want. Yes, Destiny has a great personality. Yes, Destiny is fluent in English. That is a cheap buy. That is the budget roster, because you did have other options to go for support. There are tons of supports in Europe. You had the whole EU Masters. It was just a giant tryout for LEC, and you still went and you grabbed Destiny. And I hope that Destiny really shows up. But historically, Oceania supports have been garbage, just hot garbage. I casted the OPL for a couple of splits, and it was bad. And the casters will tell you the exact same thing. So I hope Destiny proves me wrong. I hope that I have a bunch of egg on his face. He is a really nice guy, but I'm looking at that, I'm like, that is a crazy move.
He's a nice guy.
Wow, I'm turning
some
my
money.
marshmallow
He's nice.
roasting over an open fire to Frost.
Frost,
Now I'm turning it back there. I'm like, nice, my marshmallow's toasting nicely. Emily, your top three?
So it was the same as pretty much everyone, which is G2, Fnatic, Origin. I don't know if we're skipping ahead a bit, but that's actually why Destiny was one of my impact players, because I think for Origin to do well, he has to do well. And by do well, I mean actually contend for an LEC title.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fair. There is one team, I know Tyler's over there very high on Rogue, and I am a little bit too. I think that they could really punch above their weight
top side.
and do
Rogue
well.
2020.
Yeah, but actually one team I want to give a little bit of credit to here with their offseason is Excel. We haven't really talked about them at all, and they got Young
pick.
Buck. Obviously, the
I like
coach-
everything but the Mickey pick.
Don't hate on Mickey.
I mean, I'm not. I'll sell my stock in the Mickey train, but I actually don't mind what they did. Right? They picked up Norskeren. They picked up
He has a new
Norskeren,
name
who's
now,
now
right?
Tor. Yeah.
Right.
And then they also picked up Patrick as well, Origin. I'm not going to predict that they'll be top three, but I do think that they could punch a little bit above their weight, and we'll see. In a league where there are a lot of unknowns and a lot of players who are new to the LEC, this team could be all right.
Frosk, let's end on this. Predictions for the LEC. Everyone is saying G2 is far and away the leader to win the LEC again, but is it Worlds Championship or bust again? Is that the mentality?
I mean, it's hilarious because G2, I think they're just about to start their scrim, so you guys are having to make all these predictions without knowing what G2 scrims look like. G2 scrims could look like garbage for all we know. They could come in and completely collapse. Theoretically, you would expect them not to do well at the beginning of the split just because they'd be so burnt out from the entire previous year, and then everyone has gotten to look at everything that they do as well as the role swap. So I also think it's very generous to just think that G2 automatically get to be the best team, having a role swap between perks and caps, as well as being burnt out from the previous year. As far as, win a world championship or bust, I mean, I know that the players would probably want that unless you're lifting the trophy, then it really is a bust. But obviously, the fans, the broadcasting analysts is but guys, we made back-to-back world finals. Yay! We should be happy, right? All three teams made it out of groups. That's more than a lot of regions can say. But
Yeah.
Let me ask you this before we let you go, Frosk. I know as a caster, sometimes you enjoy calling teams more than others, right? What are teams that you're really looking forward to working on calling their games this year?
Ooh. Fun fact, I never got to cast G2 versus Fnatic until I did that final. That was the first time I've ever gotten to cast those two teams. And I was like so excited that it was just going to be the most amazing cast ever. And it wasn't like, it was fun, but it wasn't as fun as getting to cast Misfits or Rogue, just because those players just do such random things. I think when DOS played Volibear on a Misfits game, and it was against Splice. Misfits versus Splice. DOS is on Volibear, Kabe is on the other side of the wall, he has no vision. Volibear like flashed in and just destroyed him in his own base. I was like, you could see Kabe like he took his hands off the keyboard, he's like, I don't know what to say here. Like, why would I ever expect that? And those games are the most fun to cast.
Froskurinn, LEC color commentator, thanks for joining us for an entire segment.
Thank you.
Thank
Much
you.
appreciated.
Thank you.
You're the best. Appreciate it.